Hey guys, so we're going to talk about chapter 6 here. Chapter 6 is an incredible chapter because I think it really drives home the hopelessness of so many people, especially this late in the war and this long in the concentration camps. So chapter 6 basically focuses on the forced march from Buna to Gleiwitz, and how that kind of affects people and that kind of thing. So we get a couple of incredible moments in this novel. Again, incredible in a bad way, obviously. We have on page 85, we have the constant dehumanization, right? We have multiple times they call them dogs. If one of us stopped for a second, a quick shot eliminated the filthy dog. So this idea that, just anybody who cannot keep up is going to die immediately. And about how they're basically just this herd that is moving without thinking. Right. So on page 86, Ellie contemplates death, right? It seems something that would be so much easier. I began to think of myself again. My foot was aching. I shivered with every step. Just a few more meters and it will be over. I'll fall. A small red flame, a shot. Death enveloped me. It suffocated me. It stuck to me like glue. I felt like I could touch it. The idea of dying, of ceasing to be, began to fascinate me. To no longer exist, to no longer feel the excruciating pain in my foot, to no longer feel anything, neither fatigue nor cold, nothing. To break rank, to let myself slide to the side of the road. My father's presence was the only thing that stopped me. He was running next to me, out of breath, out of strength, desperate. I had no right to let myself die. What would he do without me? I was his sole support. Chapter 6, again, really grows Ellie and his father's relationship. We have Ellie's father refusing to let him sleep, right? Or watching over him while he sleeps because he's worried his son's going to die of hypothermia. We have this kind of, he doesn't even know that he's Ellie's whole support system here, but Ellie knows that if he gives up, then his father is going to as well. And he can't allow his father to give up. So then that means that Ellie can't give up either. But basically he just talks about how he's a body, and this body that, sorry, he's this body that like really he doesn't have much control over, and that just kind of is moving without him, and is such a weight, right? He talks about how it's so emaciated, but it's such a weight. It's something that is so horrifying. So they get the chance to rest, right? And he talks about how, this is on page 89, how there are people that have been trampled and that are dying. Beneath our feet there lay men, crushed, trampled underfoot, dying. Nobody paid attention to them. We were outside. The icy wind whipped my face. I was constantly biting my lips so that they wouldn't freeze. All around me what appeared to be a dance with death. My head was reeling. I was walking through a cemetery. Among the stiffened corpses there were logs of wood. Not a sound of distress, not a plaintive cry, nothing but mass agony and silence. Nobody asked anyone for help. One died because one had to. No point in making trouble. And that is so heartbreaking. This idea that they've just completely given up, that even in the midst of their dying, they're not calling out to anybody else because they know that they can't help them, and they know that they're just as close to dying themselves. So the fact that even in these last moments, they can't call out to anybody for comfort or anything like that, because one, they know that there's no answer, and two, they know that anybody who's still alive is going to join them shortly hereafter, in death, right? So there's some horrifying things going on there. The next important thing is Ellie's encounter with the rabbi, Eliyahu. So the rabbi and his son function as foils for Ellie and his father, right? A foil being a character who contrasts with another. And this right now we have two pairs of characters that contrast with each other, to kind of emphasize those differences. And the big difference here is that the rabbi's son has abandoned the father, because of the father's weakness, right? They've been together for a really long time, but then he sees that his father is lagging behind, and he chooses that moment to continue forward, because he doesn't want to worry about his father and himself anymore. He wants to be able to just focus on himself. He thinks that his odds of survival are greater if he's alone, right? Ellie, on the other hand, right now believes that he has to keep his father, right? So he prays, like he says on page 91, in spite of myself, a prayer formed inside me, a prayer to the God in whom I no longer believed. O God, master of the universe, give me the strength never to do what Rabbi Eliyahu's son has done, right? So he just cannot at this moment be rid of his father. So that makes them function as really nice foils to each other. The last thing I want to talk about is Juliet in Gleiwitz. This is on page 94, right after the break. And to me, this is one of the most haunting passages in all of literature and anything that I've read at this point. This one has always stuck with me, even from when I read it in high school. Those were my thoughts when I heard the sound of a violin. A violin in a dark barrack where the dead were piled on top of the living. Who was this madman who played the violin here at the edge of his own grave? Or was it hallucination? It had to be Juliac. He was playing a fragment of a Beethoven concerto. Never before had I heard such a beautiful sound in such silence. How had he succeeded in disengaging himself to slip out from under my body without my feeling it? The darkness enveloped us. All I could hear was the violin, and it was as if Juliac's soul had become his bow. He was playing his life. His whole being was gliding over the strings, his unfulfilled hopes, his charred past, his extinguished future. He played that which he would never play again. I shall never forget Juliac. How could I forget this concert given before an audience of the dead and dying? Even today, when I hear that particular piece by Beethoven, my eyes close, and out of the darkness emerges the pale and melancholy face of my Polish comrade, bidding farewell to an audience of dying men. I don't know how long he played. I was overcome by sleep. When I awoke at daybreak, I saw Juliac facing me, hunched over, dead. Next to him lay his violin, trampled, an eerily poignant little corpse. It's such a haunting scene, right? It's pitch black, it's utter darkness, all of these men that are on the verge of dying or are already dead. And then out of nowhere, out of this silence, out of this darkness, the strains of a violin being played. And Juliac's choice of music here is really important, right? He chooses to play Beethoven, which is significant because we learned earlier on in the story that the Jewish musicians weren't allowed to play Beethoven because he was German. And there was the belief that they wouldn't be able to do justice to a German composer because they were obviously, in the eyes of the Germans, lesser and thus wouldn't be able to play Beethoven to the extent that he needed to. But two, so it's a rebellion, right, against what they've told him. And two, I think that the violin is a huge symbol, right? It's a symbol for the life that he used to have before the concentration camps. It's not necessarily a symbol of hope, as this does seem to be a goodbye for sure. And as he says, his charred past, his extinguished future, he played that which he would never play again, right? And for Juliac, and I think for a lot of musicians, music is such an integral, such an important part of their personality, of their character, of their identity, that he has to play. This is the only way that he knows how to emote, the only way that he knows how to kind of fulfill who he is. And the fact that Elie Wiesel writes this novel 10 years after his death, or after after his liberation from the camps. It takes him 10 years to write this story. And the fact that he can remember these moments with such clarity, with such detail, kind of shows us how much they've stuck with him. And like he says, every time that he hears that particular piece by Beethoven, this is what he's instantly transported back to, right? To Juliac, to playing, to this little, shed that they're being kept in Gleiwitz. So, after this, they finally kind of get them onto the car. They go through one more selection. And this one's really significant because Elie and his father get separated. Elie gets sent one direction, his father gets sent the other. And Elie goes after him. So this is on page 96. I inched my way through the crowd. Several SS men rushed to find me, creating such confusion that a number of people were able to switch over to the right, among them my father and I. Still, there were gunshots and some dead. It's such a simple sentence. Still, there were gunshots and some dead. And I think the reason that Elie Wiesel puts it this way is because he knows that he's the cause of these deaths. Elie Wiesel has seen a ton of death at this point in the novel, but none of it has necessarily been his fault until this moment. There were people that died in this kind of exchange that wouldn't have, because Elie had to stay with his father, right? So there's this kind of detachment from it. I think that's one of the only ways that Elie can deal with what it is that he did here, is saying, still there were gunshots and some dead. The last significant thing about this chapter is how many of them fit into the cars now. So at the beginning of the story, they fit 80 to a car, and now they fit 100, right? So just showing the fact that they're so much more emaciated than they were before. And again, the fact that they're being taken in the winter in roofless cattle cars seems cruel beyond belief. And as we'll see in chapter 7, it leads to an incredible loss of life in this section of the novel. All right, guys. Make sure you're keeping up with your reading. I'll talk to you later. Bye.